Hey everyone, welcome to Sociastrology. Today we are going to look at the year 2025 on a personal level. We're going to look at this from the context of your rising or sun signs to see how this year is going to play out for you personally. So we're going to go through the major transits for the year to decipher the most important factors for you. So we're going to look at Pluto in Aquarius, which has just permanently moved in November, and look at how that's going to play into the fact that Neptune, Uranus, and Saturn are all changing signs this year. So they're going to be in different houses in your chart than they have been for ages. And then we also will look at Jupiter and its ingress into Cancer to look at where that benefit and luck, goodwill is coming through for you next year. And we will also look at this big epic Mars retrograde process that we have just started going through and will be playing out for the whole first half of the year. And then we will look at the nodal axis and its sign change into Pisces and Virgo to see how the eclipses are likely to play out for you, with eclipses in Pisces, Virgo, and Aries within the context of your own personal chart. So this should play out. This should work perfectly for your rising sign. It could probably also hold for your sun sign as well, but also for a detailed description of what to expect in the coming year, do feel free to book a personal reading. What I do is I look at your natal chart, I go deeply into all of that, but then I use a lot of different timing techniques to see which eclipses are most likely to play out in a very poignant way for people. Whether or not their zodiacal releasing indicates that certain alignments are likely to play out and manifest in a specific way or not, and all of the transits to your own personal planets and so forth. So to really dig into this, I definitely recommend a personal reading, but this should hold really perfectly for your rising sign, and it will probably also apply for your sun sign as well. Additionally, for a mundane astrology general overview of the coming year, politically, historically, socially, I just published last week a really epically long video about that. So if you have the time and you are interested in how this year is also likely to play out on the world stage, I recommend checking that out too. And other than that, if you are new here, do please consider subscribing for future videos. I do topics like this, so the mundane astrology on the one hand, and then I tend to look at the exact same alignment or time frames from a personal standpoint and take it through all of the signs. So if that's something that is of interest to you, then do please feel free to subscribe. I would love to have you here for future videos. And if you don't mind hitting the thumbs up button, I would greatly appreciate that. It helps the video to spread around. It helps the channel to grow. So I am deeply, deeply grateful for all of that. And without any further ado, let's get into your reading. So for Capricorn, we have Pluto is in your second house. We have Saturn and Neptune moving into your fourth house, and Uranus will be moving into your sixth house this year. So Pluto tends to bring transformation, regeneration, questions of power and control, dynamics along those lines, to your second house of finances, security, resources, your own sense of independence and stability, your values. This in itself is likely to deeply transform your attitude toward money and resources and security. That could be through some external event, possibly coming into money or having an income stream fall away and then needing to develop another one, and the impact of that experience on your values around money, the extent to which you even focus on or prioritize materialism within your life and within the context of your values. This can also have you better understanding and better utilizing the power of money. So again, like specifically with regard to the power of money, that I think is part of why your attitude toward money is changing around this time. And again, this can go in different directions here, where you're looking at the power of money and you're like, boy, I really wish that this were different. And just because society places a specific type of value on the power of money within society and our lives doesn't mean that I need to conform to that. Or it could also have you recognizing, hey, I could utilize money and my ability to bring that in to offer myself a sense of stability and security that is based firmly within myself. So you could even be seeking a liberation of yourself through money, because of the fact that perhaps other people then would not have as much control over you if that is firmly centered in yourself. Additionally, that could easily overlap. I mean, we could recognize the power of money and the even kind of power dynamic manipulation aspect of money within the context of relationships where maybe someone is a breadwinner and they have a certain level of control over the life of someone else, and feel uncomfortable with that and be like, boy, I don't want for that to be the case, and therefore I'm going to focus more on bringing that in for myself so that I'm not in that kind of a situation, and so that I feel like I have a greater sense of control over my own stability and my own security, and finding that within myself. And again, I do want to emphasize that Pluto it's a planet that tends to scare people a bit, and it's very, very powerful, but it's not just an ill doer. It doesn't just do bad things. It can also bring in really wonderful opportunities that we may feel like, am I ready for this? Or I wasn't quite expecting this level of an opportunity this quickly. So you may find that you're making a lot more money under this, and that you yourself are therefore receiving a sense of greater power over your own life, a sense of greater self-esteem through your ability to provide for yourself. One little warning that I would give along these lines is all of the stuff about power dynamics and money within the context of relationships. I would not engage in that if you, for instance, are a breadwinner, because then Pluto is very likely to kick along those lines. You're likely to get the kind of ugly side of Pluto if you wind up engaging in something like that as well. Now, on the other hand, also, and this I don't want to scare you, but I do need to throw it out there. If you do find yourself a little bit too dependent on someone else, that's another scenario in which Pluto is going to make the problems in that very apparent to you, either through events or just through realizations. Now, additionally, we have, again, Uranus moving into your sixth, and Uranus also brings changes slightly different, but also overlapping to a great extent. They can both bring their own style of upheaval, and Uranus can bring these changes in those extremes of feeling like things are a little bit chaotic or hectic, or like you kind of can't keep up with the changes. It also brings a sense of fascination, though, as well as a sense of liberation. And these two are really working together within your chart, from the second house of finances and security to the sixth house of work and jobs, tasks. This also applies to errands and chores, your skill set, training, as well as your health. So you're likely to see a lot of changes and potentially erratic matters within the context of work. If you run a business, then you could see this in your employees for sure. If you work for a company, then you could see this also in your coworkers. And this may be something that you're mostly witnessing, but it will, in different kinds of ways, introduce itself into your life. So for instance, if there is an erratic turnover of employees in a place that you're working, you could wind up then responsible for more and more of the work that goes on in that place. And that could then even change your role within a given company, because then maybe they're needing to, for instance, pay you more because you're doing a lot more work. So your relationship with work changing also around this time. Additionally, you could find that you're a little bit, if you are an employee, you may find that you're kind of uncomfortable with that. This can really have you wanting to be liberated from that and wanting to work independently. And while that might not be the easiest thing in the world to do, these could be of a great help for you if you're ready for that, to go independent as well. And that, of course, would be a major change within your role, because then you would be running the show yourself. Now, there's likely to be a lot of surprises and things that you didn't expect if you do decide to go that way. But you'll probably feel urges along those lines if you do work for someone else. Additionally, with Uranus in the 6th, there can be a lot of distractions, and it can feel like, man, every time I get a routine in order, then something changes and I need to then adapt. So we have to adapt a lot when we're dealing with Uranus. And with that hitting up your routine, the 6th house really likes for things to just be as they are. And that's the whole point of a routine, is it's the same every day. And that's what the 6th house is there for. But with Uranus there, it's so contradictory to that. It's like, what routine? So you may even feel the need to be liberated from a given routine and make those changes. But even outside of yourself, your routine is likely to be impacted. So if that's something that is really important to you, which if you have, strong Capricorn in your chart, it probably is, then this could be a little bit frustrating. I would maybe try to find some measure of a method within the madness where you're able to define specific aspects of it that you can really insist upon and keep as they are, and then allow for some flexibility and some changes and a little bit of chaos here and there within the rest of your day, going from day to day, to be able to change. But making a little bit of space for that Uranus to work within is going to work better than being like, no, I need to have my whole routine the way that it is and I need to stick to it. Uranus is not going to allow that, and it's going to find a way to break that down. So the more that you cling to that, the more complicated that this matter could be. But if that is something that's really important to you, then I would carve those periods of time out in the day and then allow Uranus to work through the rest. You could also have some changes with regard to your health. Again, these are not just problematic planets, so it doesn't have to be like a health scare. It could be, but this could also be a shakeup of your health. So finding a fascination with nutrition and bodily health and things like this, that could also arise to where you're actually working on improving that through Uranus, because maybe you want to be liberated from some health concern or something like that. And maybe you're finding that you do have some say in the situation and that you're able to make some changes along those lines that are really beneficial to you. Now, with Saturn and Neptune, these are relatively contradictory energies, but they do have a little bit of overlap. So Saturn is quite reserved. It's pretty cautious. It is very serious-minded. It tends to be very focused on a long-term goal that, again, it puts a lot of effort into achieving that goal. This can even delay gratification to that end. On the other hand, Neptune is very idealistic. It can romanticize things. It can be very optimistic. It can even be confused, or even to the level of a little bit delusional or deceived by certain matters. But where both of these come together is in a sense of a willingness to sacrifice for a greater goal, either a higher purpose or a cause or someone that we care about, especially with this playing out in the 4th house. This is also representing a lot of wisdom and a deep well of knowledge that is based on experience and that can be practically applied to a given situation. Now, additionally, these two together deal with some big picture things, especially Neptune, but Saturn as well. In their own way, they represent different aspects of global worldly concerns. So Saturn deals with the mundane, the material, the world as it is, and Neptune deals with this in a more abstract notion of the global, the universal, the human aspect of the world. And so, with these two coming together, this can have us very serious minded about how things are playing out for the world and what kind of structures could exist that would offer a more compassionate response to human need and also to spiritual need. So these are playing out within the context of your fourth house of home and family and roots and things that affect you very deeply. So those kinds of concerns that the latter concerns that I was just mentioning, these could be affecting you really deeply where you feel the need to personally get involved and to try to change something to that end or to address some human need. But additionally, this could play out in the context of maybe a family member needs help. They may need some of your effort to support them. So that may be something that you wind up being called to do in the coming years that may start to show up in 2025. Now, Neptune is going to be here until about 2039, and Saturn will be here for a few years. Neptune will bring, for sure, some confusion to this area of home and family. So things could feel a little bit up in the air along those lines in the coming years. But then Saturn is going to require some effort along these lines as well. And with these two, we can also run into some issues of boundaries because Neptune is pretty boundaryless and Saturn really needs those boundaries. So boundaries could become pretty unclear with family. That is something that I would recommend sorting out and making expectations clear between you and family members if that arises as an issue, especially if you are feeling the need to make sacrifices and there is a violation, so to say, of your boundaries or too much effort required on your part to sort something out for someone else. Especially Neptune can be not so great at sorting out its own problems. And so if there's not effort made on the other side to correct something, then you could wind up putting in a whole lot of effort and making a lot of sacrifices to try and help someone who is not holding up their end of that deal, where then that energy may feel like it's not really even contributing to any sort of betterment or improvement, but rather just building a dependency. And again, we want to be careful about creating any dependencies and the power dynamics that arise within that. Additionally, with these Saturn and Neptune, and then in the fourth, and then Pluto in the second here, we are dealing with questions of the value of property here. So with Neptune and also with Pluto, there could be intentional or unintentional deception regarding the value of property. So if that kind of question arises, I would be sure to be able to see any sort of documentation for yourself and not just rely on the word of others. But there could also then be deception along the lines of the resources that family has and a bit of a power game with regard to that as well. So again, if there's any questions around property, wills, finances that is somehow bound up with your family or specifically your home, I recommend going out of your way to make sure that you are 100% clear on all of the numbers that are really involved, the real numbers, not just what someone is saying is the case. So just something to kind of keep in mind here. But yeah, overall, it looks like both work and finance, but then also family and your living situation are requiring more focus starting this year. So this is something we're going to want to keep an eye open for. Try not to get too bogged down, because this Uranus, if you wind up getting too bogged down, you're going to want to just be like, screw it all. I'm starting over. I don't want to deal with the situation that I'm in right now because it is too claustrophobic. It's too confining. It's too controlled. There's too much power that I feel is exercised over me by circumstance, and I want to just completely change the circumstance. So that's going to be a balancing act that you'll need to sort out for yourself to make sure that you're really comfortable with it. Now, on the positive side, with Neptune and Saturn in your fourth here, this could also have you getting deeply, deeply, deeply involved in some sort of spiritual practice that really speaks to you and to your core. So I would highly recommend allowing for this transit to express itself in that way, or again, in the beginning, like I was talking about, with some sort of cause that you want to contribute to. Whatever is affecting you really deeply, I would make some space for that, because then this can play out along those lines, and it might be less likely then that it will start to impact your home and your family in one of the more difficult ways that it possibly could. So with all of that said, let's look at Mars and Jupiter for this year. So Mars is going through a big, big dramatic retrograde cycle this year. And Mars only goes retrograde about every 2 years. And when it does so, it is a whole ordeal. So typically Mars will go through a sign in about a month or so, and it's not the biggest deal. But when it goes retrograde, it's for a long time. So it plays out over the course of like 8 months. And for us this time, it's running from 6 degrees of Leo to 17 degrees of Cancer here. So from January through to the beginning of May, we're dealing with Mars in Cancer in your 7th house. And what Mars tends to bring is a need to put more effort into something. It can bring up conflicts or challenges, irritants. It can bring a greater motivation and more energy, especially when it's direct. But it's also very typical for it to bring those little complications, those little challenges, those little annoyances that need to be dealt with, as well as conflict and bickering and argumentation and things like this, drama. And so that will be playing out for the first half of the year in your 7th house of relationships, partnership, other people, generally speaking, as well as legal matters and contracts and things. So we could really, throughout the first like 2/3 of the year, run into potential contractual issues. So that's something that, again, make sure that you're seeing everything in writing for yourself, just to make sure that there's not a big problem along those lines. But people could feel more conflictual, more angry, more aggressive. Some relationships could either temporarily or permanently break down around this time. And you could find that you're just enjoying people a lot less in the beginning of the year here. Now, what's nice about this alignment is that that's going to last until the beginning of May. And then the second week of June, we have Jupiter moving into that 7th house. That Jupiter is then moving into Cancer right on the heels of Mars having been there for a while. So Jupiter can help in this area where Mars was challenging us. So Jupiter tends to bring growth and proliferation, benefit, fortune, luck, things kind of falling into place and just being a lot more enjoyable. So you're likely to find that the second half of the year, you actually enjoy people a lot more than you did in the first half. And you could encounter a lot of benefits and kindness from other people and within those relationships and your connections to others. So relationships going really quite smoothly with Jupiter moving into this house as well. Additionally, positive experiences. So not so much needing to worry then about the tone and manner of your experiences as you interact with other people out in the world as well. And additionally, again, the proliferation aspect of Jupiter can have more people coming into your life, more communication, more exchange, potentially new friends, new partnerships as well. Additionally, the Jupiter tends to want to improve upon and develop the area that it's affecting for us. So you could also see a major improvement of a relationship around this time, or like a deepening of a relationship with a lot more care and nurturing there, with this also playing out in Cancer. Additionally, when it comes to legal matters, if you have any control over the timing of things like that, I would aim for the second half of the year when we have Jupiter here, because it tends to offer a lot of benefit along those lines as well. So things should go better for you in the context of legal matters later in the year when we have Gemini here. Now, as Jupiter rather, sorry. So as Mars then moves out of Cancer, it's still in its retrograde shadow, and it takes a little while, about a month and a half at least, to go through Leo. And so this will be taking place within your 8th house. So those little challenges, conflicts, the problems and irritants that come up is shifting into your 8th house of other people's resources, joint resources, business, if you, for instance, run your own business, contracts as well, and also power dynamics. So you could run into some manipulation, some bad information along those lines. I would avoid getting into or like signing any contracts in that May, June timeframe, to just let Mars move on out of the 8th house and then just have Jupiter in the 7th affecting those matters, because Mars can really cause a lot of complications when it comes to your connections with other people, whether they be an intimate connection with someone else, or a contractual connection, or a connection based on dependency, things along these lines. So that said, let's look at the eclipses that are coming up for you. So we have the nodal axis here moving from Aries and Libra into Pisces and Virgo. And what the nodal axis represents is, so the sun comes up into the northern hemisphere and then down into the southern hemisphere throughout the year, defining our seasons. The moon does the same, but throughout the month. And there are always two places at which the sun and the moon then wind up intersecting along those lines with the earth. And so they wind up aligning perfectly. And that is why we get eclipses. So the nodal axis defines the center of the eclipse pattern that we're experiencing. So the closer that a new moon or a full moon plays out to the nodal axis within a given space, then we'll wind up getting an eclipse. Now, the nodal axis always runs retrograde, so it works clockwise around the chart, whereas the planets run counterclockwise around the chart. So it's moved from Aries backward into Pisces this year. But since it's so close to this cusp still, we will catch, instead of a Pisces solar eclipse in the spring, we will catch instead an Aries solar eclipse on March 29th. So we will have one eclipse still play out in your 4th house here, which is likely to bring up, again, changes within the context of your home and family, and feeling like you are outgrowing a given living situation, or needing to redefine the terms of a family dynamic due to a greater maturation or greater development, and wanting to continue to grow and feeling maybe a little bit stifled within those relationships. And those matters coming up in the springtime. But otherwise, what we're dealing with is along the Pisces Virgo axis, which is your 3rd and your 9th houses. So the North Node tends to bring in things that we need to grow toward, that we should be pursuing in order to continue to mature and develop as people living our lives here. And the South Node tends to indicate areas where we may feel we're over relying on this and we need to release it in some way. So with the North Node in your third house, there's an encouragement to focus on developing your communication skills or your language skills. So again, with the way that the outer planets are playing out as well, really communicating your expectations, I think is going to be super key to 2025 for you. Now, this can also indicate greater engagement or an encouragement toward greater engagement and orientation toward your community, your local community, as opposed to a global community or exploration of the world, so to say. This is asking you to focus on where you're at and your contributions and what that community is offering you in terms of your own personal growth. Additionally, this is encouraging reading, study, learning of any sort, just engagement with information and knowledge and trying to collect up pieces of knowledge. Now, this can also orient you toward focusing on your own daily life. Again, it's as opposed to what is going on out there in the world, the global news, exploring overseas or things like this. This is asking you to focus more on your own life and what's going on immediately around you and to engage with that more. So that seems to be an area of strong encouragement for 2025 for you as well. But I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Capricorn, for 2025. So with all of that said, I hope you have an absolutely beautiful year. And again, if you want to go into this in more detail, do feel free to book a personal reading. I would love to look into how all of these transits are playing out in your own individual chart. And again, if you don't mind hitting the thumbs up button, greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate that. And feel free to subscribe for future videos. I would love to have you here. And yeah, other than all of that, I again hope you have an absolutely beautiful year. And I will talk to you all soon. Be good. Bye.